Hello there, this is Jack for That's No Moon. Today I'm going to be painting my AA5 speeder truck for the Rebel Alliance. Now we're going to take you through from the base coat all the way through to detail, and as you can see I've added a few extra bits to this one. This is so that it fits into the theme of my army. So we've taken some bits from the Lehman Russ tank from Games Workshop, added a front turret, some side panels there where we've plugged some green stuff into the gap to cover up the messy job I made. We've used these front panels. There is a gap behind them, but we'll be covering them up with some netting. We've got some camouflage netting that we'll attach in later stages. We've also got these side sponsons. So this is starting to look a bit more like one of the Mark IV tanks that the British used in the First World War. So to start with, we're going to take Ardennes Green from Scale Colours, and we're going to apply this with a sponge. So we're going to be using quite a bit of this paint. Overall, this process all the way up to the end of the wash took about 2 hours. So it is a hefty job because of the surface area of that model. So I do go back to the pot several times. We're just going to tear off a nice big chunk of sponge. So we want a jagged edge, as you can see there, so that it's not like the potato prints that you do at school. We don't want it to be uniform. We quite like it to be messy, so we can see some of the black coming through, especially in the joins of some of the panels. So we're just going to dab this on. Go in as wet as you like, really, with this. You can use a dry part of the sponge to then take more of the paint away and make it more even. This is a nice method because it does give you quite a smooth transition across the model. So just keep dabbing, and you'll want this all over the model, anywhere that's not metallic. It doesn't matter if we hit the bits that are going to be metallic, because we'll just be painting over that later in a later stage. So you'll notice there on the top corner, the black is showing through the paint. We'll just go over it and we'll continue that way. So you can see the panel lines are showing through. So this is what it looks like once you've finished the sponging. You'll see that some of the primer is still showing through. It gives us a nice bit of depth in the shadows and picks out some of the detail there. We hit the underside as well. We're not too bothered about what the underside looks like because it'd be glued to its base for most of the time. So we'll take Ammo's Green Moss. This is quite a watery paint. It's mostly used in an airbrush, but it does the same job in the sponge. This is the closest green I've found to the British tank green of the First World War. So again, nice big bit of sponge, jagged edge, and we're just going to dab this over. We want a smaller area covered with this one, so this is only for the top and the sides of the model. We're not really bothered about putting it underneath. Again, not going to see it, and it should be in shade anyway. But this will just give us that brighter tone. So you see it's quite a bit brighter than the Ardennes green that is dry underneath. And just dab again. Try and keep it light. Because it's watery, it will soak up into the sponge and you'll be left with a lot of paint, but it's just very easy just to take the dry bit of the sponge and spread it about. It can be tricky not to drag your sponge when you're dabbing quite quickly, so you'll see a streak. If you see that, just get the dry bit of the sponge again and dab it so that streak disappears. So you can see where I'm going with this one, and then that's what it'll look like once it's finished. So again, you can see some of the dark green under the panels where it should be shaded. Some of the black is still showing through. That's perfectly fine for what we're aiming to achieve with this model. We've hit all the bits that are hidden on the moving turrets. We've hit the side of the engines underneath just because they are going to be visible. But don't bother doing anything underneath it. That's still just the Ardennes green and black. And again, we've left it as Ardennes green under the engines. So next step, we're going to apply a wash all over once that's completely dry. So we're going to use Citadel's Athonian camo shade. So this will give us quite it'll dull down and darken that pale green. We will come back to apply that again over the wash in the areas we want to appear more highlighted. But this really does give you that more definition, makes the panel lines pop a bit more. So we'll just slather this over the model. We need to be careful that it doesn't pull up. We don't want a really dark area, so you'll see just under where my hand was there, just running down past that vent is a big puddle that you'll catch there. And we'll pick that up and spread it around. Now I found that at the bottom of the door panels and the panels at the rear and the front of the chassis, that is where a lot of this will pull up. So just go in, wick it off with a damp brush, just so that it doesn't stain it and give you that horrible wash rim. Okay, so the wash is dry. As you can see, it's darkened down that moss green. It has made it quite shiny, so what we're going to do is we're going to go back in with the green moss, and then we're going to dab that back on quite sparingly so that it brings it back up to the original colour, because we will be using some enamel paints to dirty this up. So that wash was more for getting the panel lines back. So we'll take our sponge. We'll have less on the sponge this time, and we'll just go back in and try and hit the raised areas and the flat surfaces that are more upturned. We don't want to undo the hard work that the wash has done. And this will help to give it more of a weathered look. You know, these are patches where the paint's starting to wear a bit thin. It's starting to get bleached by the sun, maybe. Again, we want those slightly messy edges that we've got right here. And we'll just keep doing this until we've covered the whole model again. So again, I won't be going underneath, I won't be going up near the engines. This will just be for anything that's going to catch the light. Okay, so that's where we're at with this. So we've gone back in with a bit of the green moss, and we've just touched up some of the bits that we want a bit lighter. We've used it as well where the wash settled a bit too much around the bottom of the panels. Just gone in there and dabbed it over so that it doesn't stick out too much. So now we've got quite a nice smooth green all over. So the next step that I would do is I'd go in with the metallic paints and would pick out all of the metal details. So for this I'm going to use Scale Colours Black Metal. This is a really good dark metallic paint to give us quite a nice base to work with. We're going to need quite a lot because we're going to do all of the engine bay as well in this metallic colour. So we'll start down there. We'll get a fairly decent sized brush. Now the difference with the Scale Colours metallic paints and Citadel and Army Painter metallics is that these act a bit more like acrylic paints. So where you'd normally put your base coat down of lead belcher and then you wash, go back in with your lead belcher, edge highlight with Stormhost or whichever. These act more like your regular paint. So you'll put this down as a base, you'll wash it, you'll then reaffirm your base colour with the black metal, and then you'll sort of want to blend the next one up. So the next one up we've got is heavy metal, so we'll mix a bit of heavy metal into black metal and then highlight that way. So they behave a little bit differently, which takes a bit getting used to when you've come from regular metallic paints, but the final product is quite nice. It does give you a very smooth transition over the metallics. So just being careful not to hit too much. If you do catch the green, that's not a problem, because we can cover it up when we come to weathering, which is where you can hide a lot of your mistakes. So I'm not going to be doing any engine glow with this, because we want it to appear to be like a land tank. So these are going to be more like exhausts than thrusters, if you like. So we're just going to go in everywhere with the metal. And then just to show you what we're doing elsewhere. So this turret, we'll put some in. Just make sure we cover everything. So we'll just go around and we'll pick out all these bits that we want to be metallic, the vents, parts of these side guns, the vents on the side, the front gun, and then underneath we've also got some intakes and some sort of cabling underneath that will turn into a metal section, and this front grille as well. So now that that's dry, we're going to then have to wash this metal, just dull it down a bit. So you can see we've hit the barrel of the gun, we've left some of the bits around it, whatever they're called, they're left as green. The turret up here, the vents on the side, the barrel of this gun here, and then the engine bay is completely silver. So we're just going to take some Nuln oil from Citadel, we're going to wash that over with a large brush. Again, we don't want it to pool up, so make sure you wick away whenever you see that happening. So it's important to note as well, after you've used metallic paints and washed it in your pot, you should change the water, because you don't want the metallic flecks from sitting in your brush and turning all your acrylics into metallic paints. All of the metallic bits here, and then carry on around the bus. Okay, so now all our wash is dry. So this is the point we're at. We've got darkened down metal everywhere. We've got the extra layer of green moss on the top, so that we get the brighter colour up there. And now we're going to move on to the detail. So with the detail, I've sketched out sort of what I want all over the tank. So we're going for the tank core stripes at the front. They're going to occupy most of that front triangular piece here. So we'll have white, red will be under this bit of tape, and then white there. So that'll be the first job. Then we're going to put a serial number here that goes under this tape. We'll then have another serial number down here, and then we'll have the name of the tank at the back. In reality, the name would, this detail would be at the front, but I'd like to spread it out across the model, just to make the rear a bit more interesting. And that's about it, really. So the reason we're doing it at this stage is because we're then going to move on to weathering next, and we'd like the detail to be included in that weathering just so it looks like it's come out of the factory and then been battered about for a bit. So we'll start with white sands from Scale Colours, and we're just going back to our sponge and we're going to dab on this white sands. This will take a couple of coats just because a white colour always will. Okay, so just make sure your tape is securely down. The key here is a bit of patience, because it will not look like it's going on to start with. But again, that is just how white paint seems to behave. So we'll continue like this, and we'll do a bit here, a bit here. We'll try and avoid this bit of metal that we've painted. If not, we can always touch it up. And again on the other side we'll do the same. And then after that we'll then get a finer brush and we'll start putting the detail on. Right, so we've finished with the white. So we've retaped where the white is to protect it. We did about 4 coats going over. Once it dried, put some more on the brush, on the sponge, sorry, and dab it on. We're going to go in with some red now to do that central stripe. And for this, I'm going to start with Scale Colours Deep Red. So this would be sort of like a corn red if you're using Citadel colours. And again, we'll just tear off that bit of sponge, get it out of the way. Once again, there's a bit of metal there showing, but we're not too bothered if we do hit it, because we'll be reaffirming that metallic colour later on. And it doesn't matter if you do miss a bit, there's still some green showing through. At the end of the day, this is going to be a battered up tank, and the undercoat will show through. We'll be making it look worse anyway with the weathering. This won't need as many coats as the white. It's got quite good coverage, this paint. So there we go. And then we'll do that for the other side. So that's the deep red finished on there. It's a bit dark for our liking, so we're going to go in with Scale Colours Blood Red. So this is more of a Mephiston red if you're using Citadel. And again, just going to loosely sponge it on. The red's quite a thick paint with a lot of pigment in, so we don't need as much on the sponges when we're doing the greens and the whites. And we're just going to pick out sort of those open areas, so tops of this bit here, along the top of this panel. Just wherever a bit of light would hit it. We don't want to lose the shade. Pick out the rivets. Just helps give it a bit of interest. There's nothing more to it than that. So really this is an optional step for you if you want to keep it quite an earthy colour, I suppose. But I'd quite like to inject a bit of colour into this model. And we'll see a bit more of this red when we move to some of the serial numbers. And again on this side the exact same. hit these open areas, gently tapping it along the rivets. There we are. And that's pretty much as far as I'll take that red stripe. So we'll peel this off. And there we go. So it's quite stark colouring at the moment. That we will sort that once we get to the later stages, especially when we pull out the enamel paint. That will really dirty up. We'll dirty up this bit so that it actually appears more of a really dirty beige. And there we go. So that's the front of our tank done. And what we're going to do is we're going to put a little serial number in here. We're going to attempt that next, and then we'll add the smaller details towards the back. Right, so I've jumped ahead a little bit, and we've added the first serial number here, so we've gone for 916. We'll then translate that onto this side, and I'll show you how I go about doing the freehand for that. The crux of it is we use the panel lines as the guidelines. So you can see I've started with the 1 and I've run it down that panel line there to the point where it joins with this bottom panel here, and we've stuck it on just so that it overlaps, so it looks like it lines up and it's going across the panel. It's not, it looks less of a template that way. So we'll do the same on this side, and we'll put the 1 on this side of the panel, and then the 6 and the 9 will press up against this part of the chassis here, similar to how that 6 is there. So we'll show you how to do that now. So I'm using a size 2 brush, so it's nothing tiny. This is just the best way I find. Anything that's got a nice point on it. This is a Kolinsky sable hair brush, so the bristles are really soft and allow you to just get that tiny bit of paint on the end of the brush. Gives you quite a nice bit of control. So we're using quite a watered down paint here. This is the white sands that we used earlier for the tank core stripes. Let me just make sure that's flowing nicely off the brush. And then we'll come in here. So we look at how high we came. We came just before it curves over. And we'll come down. We'll stop there. So the first one is always going to be more of a transparent layer. This is our guideline. It doesn't matter too much about how tidy this is, because we are going to go for a red over the top, so it looks like the white is sort of the edge of the letter, make it more look like a 3D number. So we have got to be careful to leave enough room for this. That does mean we need to take this one to be quite thick, because this will run down the edge. And then we'll go for our 9. I do find it quite tricky that always writing a 9 with a straight tail and then having to paint a 9 that looks more like a G. We're just always checking the positioning, making sure the middle is on that cross there. The top of the number, we've probably gone a little high, but that doesn't matter because we can correct that with our weathering. So if you are looking for some decent brushes, I do recommend these. These are from Green Stuff World, and you can get a set of 4 for about €30. These are the Gold Series ones, so they're good value. These do last a while if you look after them properly with proper soap and regularly washing them. Keep the paint flecks out. Dry paint does kill these brushes. Forgive me while I'm quite quiet doing this. So let's go over this one. So we do want the paint to eventually stand out. So we want to avoid coming back in once we do the red. We can come into touch up if we overspill with the red, but it's better not to. She'll have a harder time covering that red with white. Just be careful. Places like that where you start dragging the paint where it's gone a bit dry, just get yourself a bit more water. You want the bare minimum on your brush. That's our 9. So you will notice it's not identical to this one. So what I'm going to do, so I'm just going to see where it's different. So it's different down here. So we're going to just add a bit of the white there, just to close that hole a bit more. And then we'll come in with the red and go over this side. So it's a similar width overall. Just keep adding to these little touch-ups. Straighten that out. And we're starting to get more in line. They don't have to be perfect. At the end of the day, these would have been hand painted on by either the same person or 2 different people, and they would have had some sort of discrepancy between them. The point is, does it look like a 9 on both sides? Yes. That's all we're aiming to achieve, is this looking like what it's supposed to be. And then just extend this so they look about the same height. Try and square that end off. So now we move on to the 6. So all my vehicles for the Rebels, they've all got a theme. I'll tell you the story while we're doing this, just to fill the silence. So all of my Rebels, they have a meaning behind their name. And essentially, I've got 2 land speeders painted like this. And then I've got an ATST also painted like this. And for the most part, everything's been named after my daughter so far. So we've got land speeder Persephone, because that is her middle name. I've got the serial number on the ATST is her birthday. And then for this one, this serial number had to be shortened, but it's essentially 9 for November and 16 for 1916. So this is when my grandfather's uncle was killed on the Somme, and he's the reason why we've been making our rebels look like World War I soldiers. So he was largely forgotten after he was killed. My grandfather was only 10 at the time, he was only 19. And the family largely forgot him until we found him while I was at school on a battlefield store. and we visited his grave with the school, and I can't remember what they call the little poem they read out, you know, the rising of the sun, we will remember them, that sort of thing. And I thought, yeah, we better how to remember them. So that's just a little story, just to fill this gap. I always find you'll take more care with your painting if you're passionate about it. Especially if it has a bit of meaning. So there we go, there's the 6. Again, slightly different, so let's close up this loop. I'll have to wait for this to dry a bit because it's starting to get a bit tacky. But essentially you can, I'll touch this up in between the cuts, but you can see the process. So we go in with quite watered down paint so that it flows nicely, and we get the 916 on both sides. Now they do look somewhat different. Hopefully we can tidy that up with the red. Okay, so while that's drying, this is the ATST that we painted. So you can see we've gone for it's a very similar colour. You'll notice there is a massive difference in coloration at the moment. So that just shows how much work we've got to do on this to get it to this point here. So you'll see we've got the lettering here. This is what I was saying about going over the red. And we'll have a bit of the white sticking out, so it looks like it's a bit of a 3D effect. The white sands here is no longer white. We'll be going in to the metals as well on our bust to show some heat effect. And then we'll also be sponging on this weathering and adding a lot more detail. So this is the effect that we've used here. We've used a weathering paint, so it's an enamel paint. So we'll have to get some white spirit to take it off, and that leaves behind this stain, and it's quite a nice way to just tone everything down and make it look a bit more grubby. Okay, so we'll carry on. Okay, so we've jumped ahead a bit. We've now got the serial numbers on, and we've also given the tank a name on both sides. So now we're going to do the red bits on the front serial numbers. So we're going back to the deep red. And if we again start with the 1, you'll see just what we want to achieve. Just like that. So you're essentially doing a mirror of the character, but displacing it ever so slightly to the left. There we go. We just repeat that for all of the others. Where that 9 comes up, we want just a little bit of white showing underneath the loop, the majority showing the inside left of the curve. So you only need that little bit of white showing. The same on the 6. Just round like that. Round it off. It really doesn't have to be perfect to sell the effect. What I want to get from these painting videos is a tabletop standard where you look at that from a distance and it sells the effect. That's all we're trying to achieve. This won't be winning painting awards, but we want it to look like a cohesive force on the table. So it's starting to lean into that realistic and grimy approach to vehicles. There we go. Just these two left. So you can see we're covering up all of the blemishes we had with the white paint. Just making sure we're getting a consistent thickness to the character all the way around. A bit more paint. There we go. We're going to scruff this up anyway when we come to doing the weathering, so I wouldn't be too precious about how this looks. Unless of course you want a pristine tank fresh off the line, then yeah, take your time with it. That's pretty much it there. Just fix up the thickness of the 6. So when it comes to the weathering, if you've made a particular mistake that you want covering up, there's absolutely no harm in targeting that area. So I'm looking at this 6 and I'm thinking that's not as good as it could be. So I'm going to go in quite heavy with the weathering. And I'm going to finish that up so that it's not as noticeable. So just to add a bit of highlight, we'll go back in with the blood red. Start this side. It's not wholly noticeable, but we don't want it to be. We just want to give a good coverage of red without anything else showing through. This helps with that. And on this side, just do the same again. Straight down. One. Just pick out some of these bits that need a bit of a boost in their saturation. Let's hit the line. Okay. So that's where I'll leave that. With the text at the back and the digits here, it's the same principle for when we were doing the base for the front one. So very thin down white sands and pick it out. It'd be quite translucent when you're putting it down, but then go back in and keep giving it more layers. You do have to take your time with that, because otherwise you'll get thicker characters than some of the others, and you want a fairly consistent thickness across all your letters at the very least. They don't necessarily have to be the same size. This one slopes down in the middle. Some bloke on the front lines would have painted this on, so I'm not gonna take too long over it. But that's basically it. We've got white on with metal, but again we're going to go back in soon and hit them. We'll probably do that after we do the weathering, just so that if we end up hitting any of these bits, we can touch them up. So we'll do that now. We'll start with weathering. So for the weathering, again, we're going back to a sponge. There's very little to do with a brush on these things. And we're just going to take black, and we're going to tear our sponge so it's a bit of a blade edge. So this just gives us a bit more control. There's quite a bit of variation over the surface. I'm just going to dip the tip into there. And dab it on your hand just until you get to a level that looks something like that. So it's just a bit of speck. So we're going to start down at the bottom, because this is where the heaviest weathering is going to be, where things have been run over and bashed into. So if we start down here and it comes out too heavy, it's not, nothing's lost. So we'll just go in like this. On the sharpest edges down here, we really want to be quite heavy-handed with it, and then peter it out towards the middle, as if things are being thrown up at it and bashed around. There we go. Again, don't be too afraid to play around with it. Find what works for your taste. This is the bit where you can really go to town and make it yours. If you want a really clean vehicle, you can have a really clean vehicle. I quite like mine to be pretty bashed up, so I'll be going quite heavy with these. So we're hitting all these sharp edges. I'll just show you before we cut away. So we've got a bit of weathering down here. We'll take that all the way up and around, and again down here, especially down this end, this is all going to be bashed up all along the bottom. But when we get to bits with the paint, avoid them to start with, because we want to put green down first, so it looks like the paint's chipped off, and then we'll go with the black so that that paint's then chipped off, and then we'll go to the final step after that. So let's just go around the bottom instead. We want this to look quite natural, because it can be easy to just go a bit too wild and it not look as though this could have actually happened. See, go up here, things are bashed into it, pushing things out of the way. All on the bottom. I want it to look like this has seen some action. Like it's lasted longer than it actually does on the table. So we really go heavy here. Don't neglect to hit this edge either. Because anything firing up from underneath, it's going to take the paint off. Now alternatively, you can use chipping fluid. However, not everyone's got that, but everyone has access to scouring pads. So, again, going over this, I've just hit it, but try and avoid it. It doesn't matter if we've just knocked it once or twice. Go back around this sponson. It's sticking out quite fast, so it's going to take a couple of knocks. Don't forget to move the gun out of the way and hit whatever's underneath. You're starting to see that it's starting to look a bit more like a vehicle than a model. Try not to hit at the same angle. Try and turn the sponge so you're not getting that carbon copy potato print. There you go. So I'll finish the rest and we'll come back and we'll do the rest of it and I'll show the next step, what we do with the black. Okay, that's a couple of bits we've done. So we've finished off all the black weathering all over, as you can see, and we've done the green and gone over that with the black. Some of the green's still showing through, so you don't want it uniform, you don't want to cover up what you've just done. All over the front, all up this side, hit some of the lettering as well so it looks like it's been there a while. And then I've just gone in, painted the pipes and the wires, and then touched up all the metal back to the original black metal, just where the light would hit. Other than that, we're ready to move on to the next bit of weathering. So we're going to go in with white. Now that might seem quite stark to start with, however the next step after that will sort it out. So you only want this on the absolute extreme bits of weathering. You want to sort of follow where the black was, so this is really pushing into the bare metal sort of thing. You want to be quite sparing. Don't want to overpower the model, we want it to just look like it's been chipped more than stripped of its paint. Hit the lettering as well. It might seem weird going over this bit with white, but it just sells the effect with the tinier bits of black showing through. Just on the sharpest edges there. And that's where we're going to get the most weathering, is down these sorts of bits, right over the front. This way you can get a bit more heavy-handed, because this thing's going to be ramming into all sorts, taking its paint off the front. So I'm not too bothered about going in a bit ham-fisted. Just really bashing it up there, bashing it up down there. There we go. We'll just continue around. So that's what it's going to look like by the end. We'll come back once that's finished. Okay, we're finished there now. So this is the point where I'm happy that we've got enough on there for it to look bashed about. I really don't want to overdo it. So, this is the fun part. We are going to go in with AK Interactive Streaking Grime. This is the enamel paint I was talking about. And we're just going to cover the model, head to toe, douse it in it. We'll do the underneath separately, so we'll start with the top. Does have quite a strong smell, so just be careful not to fumigate yourself. Just get it all in. It doesn't matter if it pulls up this one, because we're going to be removing most of it. We just want it to stain the surface. Just hit absolutely everything that you can see. Might as well hit the metallics. Again, we'll be putting another bit on there so that we can do the heat treatment. Definitely get it into the vents, work it in there. Make sure you're not getting any tension in the liquid by dabbing it in, otherwise it'll just sit there and you'll be left with a nasty hole in your paint. Just cover it all up. You can see it's starting to pull up. That's not a problem. This is supposed to be the messy part. So I wouldn't do this at the missus's table or near any fine fabrics. Make sure you're over your workstation, so if it does drip, because it will drip, it drips onto something that's not going to get damaged, just like that. Getting all of the nooks and crannies. Might as well take a bit of that. Try not to miss anything, because it will be quite obvious if you do. And basically, if you see any white, get it covered. Don't neglect the engine bay. Dirtiest part of them all. I would pause this, but I don't want to put it down just yet. Strike while the iron's hot. We do need to work fairly quickly because we don't want this to go too far past the half-an-hour mark. The longer it's sat there, the harder it would be to get off. You can track down one of these streaking grime pots, it's well worth it, especially for vehicles. I've got mine in a set of 3 that comes with rust streaks and winter grime. So if we were doing anything else that, you know, like a snow base, if you were doing Hoth, for example, you could put your snow down, put this grime all over it, and it'll give it like a bluey greyish tinge, as if it's been sat out in the snow for weeks. Make sure it's gone into the turret. Yep, perfect. Try and turn this around. There we are. If you've got anything like that window, make sure you get in there. You don't want the inside being lighter than the outside. Same with this turret, straight up the sides. For anyone who plays Warhammer, I think this is what they do with the grimdark stuff. Not an expert on it myself, I haven't really touched the game. So I probably sound like a bit of an idiot saying that. Oh yes, this is the grimdark. It's like common knowledge. Has been for years. It's new to us. New and shiny. Well, not shiny, but new and grimy. Oh no, I said I missed the bottom, but while we're here. If we get it in, we'll get it in. No one's really going to look under it, so just get it in where you can. As long as the visible bits are done. That's the main thing. You'll notice on my hand it splatters quite a bit. I don't know if you can see that. So again, just careful where you're firing that. If I was downstairs at the dining room table, I'd be in a bit of trouble. And I'd have to be grovelling. And nobody wants to see that. Okay. Just turn it around to get that engine bay sorted. So it's already starting to dry a bit, which is fine because it remains workable for hours. So we can really get everything in there. Again, I don't want any silver showing. Phone screens, that's another thing. Keep it away from phone screens. I've got my phone next to me on the desk, and if I'm flicking this at it, it's going to take all manner of scrubbing and picking away at it to get rid of it. And we just can't be bothered with that. So it's best to avoid it. Unless you're lazy like me, then just do whatever and have a minging phone. Okay, I think we're done. Just double checking everything. Make sure we haven't missed anything. Doesn't seem to be missing anything. Okay, so we're going to come back in half an hour, and that should be ready for taking off. Clean your brushes in the sink because it's oil essentially, so it doesn't really separate that well. It needs a good scrub. And that's what I'll go do now while we wait for that to dry. Okay, it's been about half an hour now. So what we're going to do is going to take a pot of white spirit. We just got just some regular bog standard cheap stuff from B&Q. And essentially we're just going to wipe it off with this brush. So douse your brush in the white spirit, wipe off the excess. Always test it. So we'll start underneath where we've got this engine intake here. Just rub it all over. Rinse it in the water rather than in your white spirit, because otherwise you're going to make your white spirit dirty. So once you've wiped off a bit, go back in, wick off the excess. Try to avoid pulling it out of any recesses. Just scrape it away. As easy as that. So you can see the contrast between these two bits here. So we're just going to keep going around and doing that. Fairly quick process. And then we'll see what it's like at the end. Scrape it away. You see you get that browny green colour now instead of the bright green moss that we had originally. don't really want to take too much off the bottom. Just take it back. Like that. So, showing you on the side. Let's do it here. Now if you want it to be more grubby, you can go back and do it again, but just try and control the levels, because it'll be harder to take the excess off. So be careful with how you're wicking. You can leave more like around the rivets. Bits like this, and these edges, that's where I usually take the most. Let the weathering do the work. And that is pretty much where I'd want that front section to be, losing the colour of the white sands essentially and turning it into this murky brown colour. So it looks like quite an old vehicle. Seen a lot of action. And you might just pull that back a bit, just to get a bit paler of colour coming through. Let the red show up a bit. Let your weathering show through. But that is pretty spot on for where we want it. So I'll continue round now that I've shown you what it's like on the coloured bit, and then we'll come back once the enamel paint's off, and we'll move on to doing the metal and showing you how we do a heat treatment on that. Okay, so the enamel is largely dry. However, it will still be workable probably until the morning now. It's about 8 o'clock at night. So I'll leave anything else on the bodywork. I'm quite happy with how that's come out, so that'll probably actually be all I do now, is just leave it. The most I'll probably do is I'll flick some mud from the basing up onto the underside of the body. But the last thing that I do want to do is I want to touch up the guns, just so they're a bit more, you know, it's a bit more detail on it. So we're going to re-establish the black metal. Since we put the enamel on it, it's dulled it down a bit, so let's just bring it back up. We just want the barrels on this. Just going to touch up them side bits there as well. I forgot to do them. Won't be taking them any further though. Same with these vents. Let's just re-establish some of that paint so it looks a little less green. Do want it to stand out. And then the main gun at the front. Don't mind leaving a little bit of a green tinge, but you know, at the end of the day it's going to reflect that colour. Again. Hopefully that won't take too long to dry. So we're just going to use several washes to achieve a really simple heat effect. Okay, so we've re-established that. I'm going to go in with the heavy metal from Scale Colours. We're going to mix that into the black metal to get a transition. Remember how I was saying treat them like acrylics? This is how you get that smoother transition to the brighter metal. Just realised I'm not actually holding this under the camera. That would be really helpful for a painting tutorial. There we are. So we're just doing this so that these washes stand out a bit more. If we could put the effort into doing this, we might as well make it so that we can see it. Again, don't worry about it being a bit stark, because it will get washed down to be quite dull. And then this is pure heavy metal, just from the very top. If you're using two lights like this, these are two daylight lamps, just picked up from IKEA and Wilko's when it existed with the bulbs. You can hold it and see where you might want to place your light. So you'll see there's a strip of really quite shiny light down the middle of that gun there. That's where I'll place my highlight. Same with this one. Just place it in there. Just like that. I'm going to just pick out a few of these bars here. While the paint's on the brush, we might as well. So one thing you could do as well, thinking about it, I'm not going to do it in this one just because of time, and this video is already getting long enough, where you've got things like this set of bolts here, or you've got this panel, you've got this panel here with the vent on it, the sponson. You can get some rust effect paint, just do a little trickle down, give it 10 minutes to dry, and then take your white spirit and just feather it away so it looks like a streak. If I do it, I'll show you, but at the moment I'm quite happy with this being rust free. It already looks pretty grimy without that. Okay, just wait for the last few bits to dry. Just always check over your model, make sure you're happy with it from different distances. So I'm looking at the 916 and I'm thinking maybe we were too heavy with the weathering, but then it sells the effect. Same with the serial numbers. You can still see them. And the shine's not helping from the lights, but once we varnish it, it'll dull it down and it'll look more like this. So you can see there's next to no shine on this. There's a bit of shine on the front because I did something after I varnished. So you can see that's picked out there. So I'll varnish the whole model with this ultra matte varnish from AK Interactive. Brilliant stuff, I use it on all my models because the scale colours are quite matte as they are. So when I'm painting something like an Ewok, these are all done with scale colours. They're quite matte. Just this is before varnish. Put the varnish on top and it retains that matte appearance. Whereas something like Storm Shield from Citadel could be quite glossy, or more glossy than I would want. Right, so let's start with the first of the washes. So this is going to form the bigger chunk, so we're going to be doing it in gradually decreasing sections. So we'll start with Seraphim Sepia. We'll start up here on this top turret. So load up your brush, and you need to think about where the heat's going to be. So I want the heat to be coming right down here because in my head my tank's going to be firing actual shells, so the whole barrel will be warming up. I'm just going to drop that in. Don't worry about being heavy-handed, this is meant to be bringing colour to the model, so make sure you cover all round, you don't want to be left with a silver bit underneath. Now the wash will naturally pull to the underneath, that's just how it's going to go. So if you just keep grabbing it, bringing it back around, make sure it fills all the nooks and crannies. And then we'll do the same down here, cover all of this bit and this bit, and then we'll bring it to there. Same again. I'm going to hit this whole barrel with the sepia. This is the weaker of the washes we're going to be using, so don't worry that you're not actually seeing that much of the colour. The colour will strengthen. So now we'll just wait for that to dry. What I'll do is actually talk you through the process. So while that's drying, so as you can see, if we get our brush again, got a bit of a tide mark on this one. You just see it there. So just get your damp brush and brush that away. Same down here. Just dab at it so it blends that gradient. Really easy to use with washes because they're so watery anyway. So instead of waiting for watching paint dry, we'll just go through it. So afterwards you can do Reikland Flesh Shade, and you can do that on a smaller area. So for this top gun, I would probably come down to where this crease is here, and that's the sort of distance you want to be leaving. With a smaller barrel like the side ones, it'll have to be smaller, and then again here, I'll probably go into this middle section and drag it closer to the end of the barrel. After that, where is it? Didn't bring it up with me, that's good, isn't it? So then you'll go to Caribou Crimson after that, and then the final one is Druchii Violet, and then right at the end you want an Agrex Earth shade. And then if you want to add some soot, just dry brush some black onto the barrel. But yeah, I haven't got the pots to show you at the moment, they're in another room. But that's the gradient. I'll show you when we come back the gradient and then what it looks like on the model. And then that's pretty much going to be us done for this. So we'll come back in a minute. Right, so we're at the last possible thing we can do to this, which is just putting a bit of Agrex Earthshade right on the end of the turrets. It's just to darken them down a little bit so they don't appear quite so purple. Right around the very tips. So this one will be larger. Make sure we get it all round. And then just feather it a bit. And then this one here. And that's pretty much it. You can see, if we use this one as an example, we've got the bare metal down here. We move to Seraphim Sepia, then into the Reichland Flesh Shade, then into the Carabel Crimson, Druki Violet, and on the very end we just put the Agrex Earthshade. That's for all of the turrets, so you can see it there as well, and you can see it just there. It just gives that illusion that the turret's been firing a lot and they're slightly overheated now. And that's pretty much it for this. We've weathered, we've used enamel paints to darken things down and make it look dirty. We've done heat treatment, we've done washing. There really isn't much else we can do. So I'm just waiting for bits on the base to dry. So all I've done here, you're not going to see any of this, that's why it's all messy and horrible, but to give the outside the decent view. So we've torn up some coffee stirrers, literally just get hold of them. I think it was like 1,000 for £2 off of Amazon, and then you just twist until they break. It gives you a natural splintered wood on both ends. So that's what I do for that. And then these are just some strips of poppies from War World Scenics. Where did that one go? There it is. And then cut them up because they're quite large when they come off the strip. Cut them up into smaller tufts and spread them about to be poppies. And that's pretty much all I've done. A bit of typhus corrosion on the barbed wire just to make it look like it's aged. And then all I'll do next, once the tufts are dry, is I will apply a thin layer with a brush, this AK Interactive acrylic muddy puddle. It just gives it that extra shine. If I can get another Rebel model, I can show you what I mean. So here. So there we are. You can just see that shine on the base. And again with the coffee stirrers, we're going to use an Agrex Earthshade and a Athonian Camo Shade mix just to give it that rotten wood look. And that's pretty much us done. So I'll get some pictures of this and put it up on the Instagram. But yeah, thank you very much for watching and bearing with us. I hope you found that some of that useful. You can apply it to your own builds and your own colour schemes. But thank you very much for watching.
That's no moon.